Hi guys, I'm Brittany from Quarter Acre Roots, and I want to help you turn your yard into a garden. One of the ways that I like having a super low maintenance and lush garden for as long as I can each year is by planting perennials. This video is going to outline 10 of my favorite perennial herbs to have in the garden, whether you like them for cooking or medicinal reasons or just looking great and providing really awesome and useful ground cover. You will definitely find something helpful in one of these perennial herbs. So we're going to cover the obvious ones like thyme and sage and what I like about them, but there may be a couple in here that you have not heard of, especially if you're newer to gardening, but even if you're experienced, you may have some new ones as well. First up, we're going to talk about thyme. Now, I have more creeping thyme in my backyard than I know what to do with, and that's because I love using creeping thyme as a ground cover. So this is one tiny plant that I planted here. This one actually started as a propagation as well, and as you can see, it is really spread. As thyme spreads on the ground, it will throw out little roots to continue spreading and rooting itself. So it makes an excellent plant to put somewhere where you want to have something practical, but you also want to cover the ground to help suppress weeds and give you something that you can use. I haven't done any maintenance on this specific plant here, and you can see that it has some areas that look really, really nice and lush, but it also has some areas that look a little bit bare. Now, I'm a big fan of leaving foliage in place over the winter because we never know what could be nesting in here as far as little insects go. But what I will probably do in the spring is cut this area back some, just cut all of this dead growth off, and it might look a little bare right there to begin with, but it will eventually fill itself out because of how it spreads and then fill that area in again. Another thing you can do if you have those bare spots on your plant, but the growth on the end looks good, is take a little cutting off of the plant and then just bury it in soil up to here and keep it evenly moist, and it will grow a new thyme plant for you that you can transplant somewhere else or pass on to others. Another one I definitely think you should add to your yard is a perennial sage. This, I think, is a Berggarten variety. I have a post all about how to care for sage in your garden, perennial sage, that I will link below. And then I also have a post on propagating sage because almost all of the sage plants in my yard are from propagations. I started off with 2 clearance plants in the very back of the yard, and then I've been propagating them and putting them elsewhere ever since. These are some of my more recent propagations. I planted these about a year ago in the fall, and the plant has done really, really well. It's just a really nice mounding spreading perennial that also can really help with pest deterrence if you plant them around your raised beds because they have such a strong smell. And because they have such a strong smell and taste, they're generally going to be pretty pest resistant as well. I have not had any issues with my sage plants and pests. As far as maintenance on these goes, what I will probably do in the spring is come in here and cut off some of these taller stems so that it can get a fuller and more mounding look over the next growing season. And here's an example of the exact same type of sage plant, but this one is in the back of the yard, so it's exposed a little bit more to the different elements out here. You can see it's a little bit more looking worse for the wear. The stems look kind of bare and the growth on the tips looks really lovely. But even though the growth on the tips looks really lovely, what I will probably do is cut this one all the way down to like an inch above ground in the spring when things warm up for good, so that I don't end up with like a weird bare area in the middle of the sage plant and then full lovely growth on the ends. Cutting it down will allow it to grow back from scratch and look super nice and lush and mounding and fill out the areas that I have it in. Speaking of plants that look a little bit bare in the middle and on the bottom of the stems, we're going to talk about lavender next. I love perennial lavender, but this one can be a little bit more challenging of a plant to maintain where we're at least in Maryland Grow Zone 7. I have a couple different types of perennial lavender in my yard. I love using the flowers in arrangements and drying them for things. I love snipping and drying the leaves for different things because they also have a really lovely fragrance. But you can see that unless I come in here and do some pruning and maintenance, which I admittedly have never done on this one, it does get a little unruly looking. If I had been pruning this one regularly, this plant would look a lot healthier. But overall, in terms of the perennial herbs that I have, I like to have things that I don't have to do too much maintenance on. So what I'll probably end up doing with my perennial lavender is taking some cuttings from it and propagating it and And after a couple years, when the plant starts looking a little bit rough, I will probably just replace it with a propagation from the previous plant. But I love having lavender on hand because who doesn't love the smell of lavender? Here's another younger lavender plant that I have up here by the pond. And this one you can see has a little bit of a shorter and more compact growth pattern, and that's because I did remember to prune this one. So it has less of a empty area in the middle. The stems are just a little bit more lush all the way down, and this one will certainly look even better next spring when it starts actively growing again. But for now, I think it looks really pretty here with its silvery green foliage in the middle of the winter. Next up is a plant that has maintenance needs a little bit similar to the lavender plant, but I find that it's a little bit hardier and lower maintenance, and that is perennial rosemary. Rosemary is one of my favorite scents out there, so I love having the smell of rosemary all over my yard. I find this one to be generally very hardy where we're at, although we did have some really cold weather last winter that killed off some of my rosemary plants. And I heard the same thing from some other people in my grow zone, that they just found that their rosemary could not take the super cold temperatures. I generally do not prune my rosemarys too much, and you can see while they do have some bare stems here on the inside of the plant does a better job of covering that up with pretty much just the way it grows. I will probably come in here in the spring and prune this one up because this is one of my younger plants, and I did end up having to remove one of my older rosemary plants earlier this fall because it was in the way of where we were expanding the pond and it was just too big to transplant. So I need to be taking some cuttings from this one to propagate so I can replant more rosemary up there by the pond. Up here I've got a bunch of perennial herbs lining the house because this area is right next to a lot of my raised beds, and I just wanted to make sure this area was super low maintenance and will come back year after year. So this is an example of a plant that started as a cutting that was about this big when I rooted it and planted it last fall. I've got two of these bookending this garden. They smell amazing, they look amazing, and since they're up by the house, I find that they're a little bit more shielded from some of that super duper cold that can endanger these plants when we get those cold snaps. Next up, we've got Comfrey, and this is looking a little bit worse for the wear right now because of all the cold temperatures we've had lately, but the new growth in the middle is already looking really beautiful compared to the older growth that's been really through it the last month or so. A lot of people will use Comfrey for medicinal purposes. I grow Comfrey because it spreads and it has a really deep taproot that helps bring up really deeply buried nutrients from the soil. It just helps loosen things up, aerate things, and it also makes a really good green mulch. You can chop those leaves off, leave them where you chop them just to add back to the soil, and then the plant will come back with a vengeance looking really lush and green. Since it spreads, it also makes a really good plant to plant somewhere that you want to choke out weeds. So this area we have some pretty bad bindweed that I've been working on treating, and adding some Comfrey around it I'm hoping will help with that, along with a couple other things I'm doing to treat the bindweed because it drives me absolutely insane. But I'm looking forward to seeing how this Comfrey does next year around our raised beds. Next up we have sorrel, which I have growing underneath one of these plastic covers just because I have it in the corner of one of my beds. And this is one that actually doesn't look very good in the winter but will rebound really nicely in the spring. So this one looks the best out of all of my sorrel plants because it is in here under the covered greenhouse cover. And the leaves look a lot like a spinach to me, like a long skinny spinach. And if you've never had sorrel before, they have like a really tart, lemony taste to them. It's kind of an acquired taste, but I really love it. I like to chop up a salad and then chop up some sorrel and put that in the salad as well because it adds like a nice lemon tinge to the salad, which I think is great. My husband hates it. I absolutely love sorrel, and it comes back year after year, and it also grows throughout the peak of the summer when a lot of other leafy greens are not growing. So it's definitely something I recommend trying out if you like that tart taste. Okay, next up we have something that may be a little bit controversial because I know this one is quite an aggressive spreader, but it is oregano. And the type of oregano I have planted in my yard here, I'll show you guys what it looks like because it's not the traditional large leaved oregano you may be familiar with, that you may be seeing in garden centers and whatnot in the spring. So this is a smaller oregano. It spreads the same way the thyme does. So it sends out these stems And then the stems root down into the soil, so it just kind of spreads. Now this one is quite the prolific spreader. This is one of 3 plants I have in the yard, and that is more than enough oregano year round. This is a thriving plant no matter what the conditions are. We just had 2 inches of snow melt, and so that makes it even more impressive that it looks this good. We also have, I'll show you guys, this is the first oregano plant that I have just been propagating off of. It started off just like a little plant right in the center here, so you can see it has spread quite a bit. I am okay with that for now, but what I will probably do when we come in here to landscape in the spring is pull out some of it so it doesn't encroach on the path that I'm putting in here, and then pull out a little bit over here, just literally rip it out of the ground, because that's how I maintain oregano plants, is just rip them out of the ground. They do not need gentle handling. They will be fine. I will just rip that out in the spring to contain its spread. The next 2 I'm going to show you definitely do not look good right now. They don't look good all winter, but they will rebound really, really well in the spring. And the first of those is a lemon balm. So I have my lemon balm here planted in a pot because lemon balm is in the mint family. And if you've been gardening for longer than 30 seconds, you've probably had someone tell you not to plant any sort of mint plant in the ground unless you literally never want to not have mint, because it will spread like crazy. So what I will do in the spring, probably in late March, is just cut this all the way down to the soil line, and it will rebound really, really beautifully. So this is just a regular mint that I have here. Up here behind me, I have something really similar. I have a little catnip plant, which is related to mint, which is why I have it in a pot as well. I love having mints just to pick it and put it in cut flower arrangements and teas and whatnot. And I also really like planting lemon balm. So that's another one that is closely related to mint. I have it in my elevated raised garden bed here with my strawberries. It does not look great right now, but this is my lemon balm plant. I will throw up a picture of what it looks like when it looks nice, but I will just let this one resprout, kind of break off all of these. Actually, I'm going to leave them so I remember that there's a lemon balm plant here, because I will forget if I don't. And I really love using these, much like the regular mint. I like using the lemon balms in teas and arrangements and things like that. And I just like walking by when I'm out in the garden and just kind of rubbing a leaf and smelling it, because I love, love, love lemon. Just like the sorrel, I love the lemon taste. I love lemon smell as well. So I like having it as an accent in some of my raised bed areas, in my green stalk, in my contained areas where I don't have to worry about it going absolutely crazy. And last but not least, we have one of my favorites for the butterflies. That is parsley. And this technically is a biennial plant, meaning it completes its life cycle in 2 years. So this lovely lush plant that I planted last spring will go to seed next year and then die. So I will collect seeds from that and start some new plants. I try to stagger these plants with where they're at in their life cycle all around my garden. I love having parsley, 1 for cooking, 2, because look how lovely and lush it looks in the middle of the winter after all the snow has melted off of it. And 3, because it's a really great host plant for swallowtail butterflies. So you will find swallowtail butterflies all over your dill, your parsley, your rue, your fennel, all of that. But parsley is perennial, so when my dill flowers and goes to seed, which it does very, very quickly in the summer, I will always have parsley here to make sure I have something for the swallowtail caterpillars to lay their eggs on and to feed on. Okay, so that about wraps up my tour of 10 of my favorite perennial herbs that I think you should add to your garden. If you have any that you think I missed, please let me know in the comments. Please also let me know why you like growing them, what you use them for. I am always looking for new things, especially perennial and low maintenance things that I can add to my garden to create some more variety. Until my next video, happy planting.